Hey friends, Jeff here with a new episode of Conversations Life Science Leaders Aren't Having. Today, I'm excited to welcome Robert Hoffman. Robert is CEO of Kintara Therapeutics, and they are developing novel therapies in the fight against cancer, specifically glioblastoma. As I've gotten to know Robert, who he is to me is humility and service. Robert tells the story in our conversation about how he didn't even want to be CEO and didn't think he would be good at it. And as an opportunity presented itself at Kintara, he stepped into that role, and it brings his whole heart to his leadership. He is a values-driven guy, and he tells a story about how he stepped in to cover the front desk for the receptionist when she was at lunch, really epitomizing his humble heart. I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation with Robert Hoffman. Robert Hoffman, welcome. So excited to have you on the show and to dive into some really fun topics.
Great. Happy to be here.
You just heard me do a brief introduction of you and who you are to me in the time we've gotten to know each other. Would love for you to start us off and let our audience know what you're up to in the world.
Yeah, I was lucky enough to last week ring the Nasdaq bell. In May is Gray in May, which is National Brain Tumor Month, and GCAR, Global Coalition for Adaptive Research, which the clinical study we're in was there, along with National Brain Tumor, as well as all the other companies within the GCAR study. I was actually the person who was able to set it up, but I thought it's not about Kintara in this case. It's more about all the companies and all the institutions that are working to help for glioblastoma in this case. So I was able to invite all those different companies. The other kind of neat thing that I was able to do is my daughter lives in DC. She was able to join me on stage and ring the bell as well. And then had a little fun time later that night. We went to the Harry Potter musical. My daughter's a drama queen. So whenever she gets into New York, we always have to do something like that. It was actually quite good. I was pleasantly surprised. So, but traveling to New York from San Diego, I was just in Vancouver yesterday, and right before New York, I was in Europe. So what else is going on? There's a lot of travel going on. So, but I'm happy to be here and sit down with you.
Yeah. I mean, you're working on at Kintara some really important stuff. We were just talking about a colleague of ours who just lost a dear friend, a mentor. So I imagine that obviously is meaningful. I'm curious, day to day, what is it that you're excited to get out of bed for?
Yeah, so one of the other constituents that I invited to the bell ringing is a patient. So I have a person who may invest in the company, but I've known him for a period of time now. His sister was at UC Davis getting her vet degree in the last stages of taking her tests. And unfortunately, she started getting headaches and was diagnosed, been on treatment for about a year now. I invited her to come, and unfortunately, she couldn't make it. Her brother, who's the investor, and his girlfriend were able to come. And so you asked me what gets me up in the morning. Hearing stories like that, if there's anything we can do to help these patients or help physicians treat their patients better, that's what gets me and the rest of the team. I have an excellent team around me that thinks about these things and how we can help patients in particular.
Mm. I'm always curious about this. How do you and your team keep, in the midst of the craziness of biotech and drug development, it's a pressure cooker, and
Yeah.
and you get in the weeds on projects and plans and regulatory and all that stuff that goes with your world. How on a day to day or maybe week to week basis, how do you reconnect to what you just described, delivering delivering things to doctors, to patients ultimately, that's going to really make a difference? How do you connect to that regularly?
So it's not easy because you kind of lose focus. I have an upcoming shareholder meeting. I need to get some things approved, and I've been spending the last, although it helps in certain degrees, I've been spending a lot of times talking to shareholders, and they bring me back. Sometimes they want to hear how things are going, and it brings me back to focus. But I will say I make a concerted effort, and the rest of my team does, to speak to our scientific advisory board members in particular, as well as we have a really close relationship with MD Anderson. Dr. Kamai is there, and man, I was just at AACR, and this guy just bleeds taking care of his patients and figure out better ways. And it's just I feel so honored to be in their presence because my advisory board members are oncology cancer docs, and the things that they think about, or their patients, they think about just get me more enthused that I got to get this over the finish line. So just being in touch with our constituents, and my CSO is doing this all the time, where he's reaching out to experts across the world. And maybe in GBM it's a little more acute because nothing has been approved since 1999. So these physicians are really looking for anything to help treat their patients. So that it's very apparent that we got to do better in this area, and we're hopeful that Kintara is that one company that can move the ball forward. Anyway, there's lots of drugs in development for GBM now, which is nice to see because there had been a little bit of a dearth of drugs moving forward because of all the failures, quite honestly. So there's been a resurgence in that regard. It's a very big market, lots of patients suffering, unfortunately. There's been a little off track, but in China in particular, there's been a increase in GBM prevalence, and we're not sure why. Actually, no one's sure why glioblastoma happens to begin with, but there's been a significant uptick there. And so there's been lots of interest from Chinese companies on getting something approved as well.
Mm, mm. Yeah, that's why I love this work and working with companies like yours. Having you on the podcast is the passion is so palpable. It's so
I
palpable.
love it too, but it's so binary. It's we
Yeah.
get to the data, we haven't seen the data, we have
Yeah.
good data coming into the study, and you turn the card over, and just lots of people have a vested interest in this. My shareholders, patients, physicians, all my employees, all the stakeholders through relationships we have, and I know everyone's rooting for the best, and I am too. But
Mm,
it's very binary.
yeah. Yeah. Well, we'd love to. You've already given us a little bit of a picture of behind, outside of work. Would love to do that in a little different way. We answer the question you just did. What do you do? You're
Yeah,
CEO of
yeah.
Kintara. We love to ask the question, what do you love?
Uh, I love my family and my friends. So everyone knows the family part, right? It's really important to me. I've so back up 2 years ago, I got foot surgery, and I sort of not sort of I got addicted to TikTok because I couldn't move around for like 6 weeks. So somehow it feeds you what you want to see, right? And so I was getting all these cooking recipes down there, and you can learn a cooking recipe in 30 seconds. So fast forward, I get better, and I invite all my buddies over, and then it's turned into more where I have dinner parties, and it's called my TikTok dinner party, where I try all these new recipes, and I found out I'm quite good at it. And so I just love making my friends happy, and the couples that we hang out with. I'm really lucky that I have close friends and a wife who has tons of friends, and my kids who are well adjusted, and I love hanging out with them. So
Mm,
that's what really makes me happy.
yeah, that's
And
great.
the other thing I found out is I'm a dog lover. I We had our first dog loves my wife, and so just follows her around everywhere. So I'm like, oh, okay, and I grew up with dogs, but the second dog loves all of us and loves me in particular. And so if they start barking, I apologize. But in addition to the food recipes, I get all these dogs and dogs playing with cats and monkeys and all kinds of stuff. But I just love that stuff. So.
Oh, that's great. I have my own dog story. So I didn't grow up with pets at all. I had a parakeet when I was little, but we got a COVID dog
Ah,
and I was all for it. You know, we were all in, but I've been shocked of how I've fallen in love with this little dog. Her name's
yeah,
Ellie. She's about
yeah,
2 years old now. It's shocking, to be honest. Like she'll bring tears to my eyes
yeah.
at certain points when she's just on my lap, and yeah, it's wild.
It is like an awakening actually, because I never expected it either.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, it's pretty cool.
yeah. There's a quote, Robert, by John Ruskin that I just love, where it says, "The highest reward for a person's toil is not what they get for it, but who they become by it." And and I'm curious, as you reflect now on decades of work, who have you become?
I've thought about this over time. I think I've become, hopefully, and I've heard this, someone who is giving of my time. So you're right, 30 years, I've surrounded myself with really smart people, but I've learned things along the way that I maybe don't necessarily always appreciate. But I was CFO for a long period of time, 17 years at Arena Pharmaceuticals, raised, $1.2 billion during that time. And I have these new CFOs that will bump into me at a cocktail party or whatever and ask if they can have 15 or 20 minutes of my time. And I'm always willing to do that because I always figure I can learn something as well. And I've heard through the grapevine that people really appreciate that. And actually, I've heard that some people are afraid to approach me because of the, I don't quite know how to explain it. They think that I won't have time for people because of my career that I've had, and I hope people never think that because I'm always willing to be giving of my time. Kind of semi-related. There was a board that I was interviewing for, and they said, Robert, we want to love to have you come on board because you'll tell us the right financings that we should do. And I said, well, I'll tell you, I'll tell the financings that you should avoid because I think I've done every single one of the horrible financings that you shouldn't do. And sadly, they love that even more. So I joined the board, and here I am today. So it's just through experience, you learn a lot of things that you don't necessarily appreciate, and I think it's important to give back to our profession. I know I'm CEO now, but I really connect with CFOs in particular because that's what I've done most of my career.
And I'm going to ask an extension of that question about who you've
Sure.
become, and who, at this stage, 30 years, who do you see yourself becoming? What do you see forming in you that maybe is new or still in formation?
Yeah, well, so I mentioned I connect with CFOs. I am really, really enjoying being a CEO. So I can see becoming hopefully part of a organization that's successful, launch a drug on my own. I really, and I'm surprised because just to give a little bit of history, I was sitting on 6 public company boards. I was retired, and the CEO of Kintara was turning 70 and just realized he didn't want to do it anymore. I have finance experience, as I told you. I have some manufacturing experience at Arena. We acquired a manufacturing facility, and I was managing director. I'd fly to Switzerland and oversee it for 4 or 5, 6 years. And then prior to that, I was at Heron Therapeutics, where we had an approved drug, got some other ones approved. I thought, you know what, I'll take a stab at this and become CEO. I talked to the scientific advisory board members who are really, up on our drug and think that it's promising. And so I did it. I'm enjoying kind of being the decision maker, listening to my team and ultimately making the decision. And
Mm.
and so I'm shocked that I never wanted to be CEO before, even leading up to, sitting on the boards. I didn't. So I enjoy being the decision maker in that regard. And I'm confident. I didn't realize I had the confidence level that you need. The one thing, and this maybe is a little off base, that I did not realize, and every CEO has now told me this, is that it's lonely because you make these decisions and you don't have anyone to, kind of not bounce things off, but just to be real. You have to stick with it, go with it, and you can't be wavering or anything like that. You can take information and process it, but you can't show weakness. And every person is weak, right? Or has weaknesses. And that caught me off guard, and I'm now used to it. But I didn't. No CEO told me until after I took the job, and I have lots of friends that are CEOs. So anyway,
Yeah,
it was
maybe
interesting.
I've heard the same thing, and maybe
I never heard that.
maybe they've all just decided that we're not going to share this. We're just going to keep this bit of information to ourselves.
Yeah.
For
One
the
of the things that I started when I became CEO, and I just love this, and I haven't had a chance to do it now. I think I've done it 2 or 3 times, is I pull together these CEOs that I know and love who are well accomplished. One sold his company for 7 billion, another one for 3.4 billion, another one, on and on. It was a dinner party, and I bought dinner and wine and stuff. Sat them in a room at a very nice restaurant, closed the door, and just told them of the issues that I was having. And it was so helpful that they were very, very freeing to give information and their opinion, unvarnished, completely unvarnished. And literally every person came back and said, I would love this and I want to do this again. And I did it again, and I expanded the group, and I'm looking forward to do it again. So super fun, but just really insightful, the things that they had. And they were in some cases brutal to me, like where they're like, Robert, the answer to this. And I did know the answer, but I wanted some validation because, like I said, I can't bounce things necessarily off of other individuals. And so it's really helpful.
It's interesting because one thing you said to me in our prep call was about the value of coaching for a CEO, how important that is.
Yeah.
What strikes me is, yes, of course, as a coach, I agree with what you say. However, what you're presenting it's different. So having this, what did Lincoln call him, his kitchen cabinet, having this kitchen cabinet around the dinner table of CEOs, of experienced, wise individuals, has a very important role. And then your statement, how coaching is important. How do you see the interplay or the distinction between working with somebody maybe like me or an executive coach in this and this informal board of advisors?
I think you can get valuable tools out of both. Maybe and you tell me, but that'll turn it back on you. You can give me certain tools that are very building of different things that can be applied to a lot of different things. When I speak to these individuals, I have certain circumstances that they have industry experience, and they can tell me, well, this is how I've done it, and this is what I've seen work, and very tools that I can use, the next day,
Yeah.
to tackle an issue. I've taken 3 or 4 of them on one-on-one lunches then, and we've done it 4 or 5 times actually. That I have a very specific issue that I know that they dealt with, and it's extremely valuable. I'm paying a lot in lunches and dinners, but well worth it. So coaching, I think, has its place as well, and I've done group coaching, but I've encouraged others, the boards that I sit on, to do coaching as well. And if you can glean any little thing out of it or big thing, I think it's well worth it.
Yeah.
We all can get better.
Mm.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thanks for pulling that curtain back on how you think and your what's percolating in you. I want to frame the name of our show, and just get what's your first reaction? Conversations life science leaders aren't having. What's the first thing that comes to mind when you hear me say that?
Well, I not to touch on it again, but I think we do forget because we get caught up. And maybe being a smaller company, I have one program I'm really focused on. I think sometimes leaders forget their stakeholders, and it's not that maybe they don't forget them, but they're not talking about them. So we got to do a better job of putting patients and physicians first in our conversations. I know everyone's thinking about it, but you pointed to it. The market is just really miserable for biotech in particular. So we're all worried about our cash burn. Like I said, I was just in Vancouver, sitting down with my CFO, going through things on our budget. It's first and foremost, they're all linked, because if you run out of money, you can't take care of your stakeholders. But I think we have to float back to the surface why we're all in this and whatnot. And so I've thought about, and maybe it leads back to the conversation we had before, leading off. I have executive meetings every week, leading off with a story about the current state of glioblastoma in a patient, whatever, and just keeping it at the forefront. I think I mentioned before, we do a good job with our scientific advisory board members, but there has to be a continued link, because it's just, I have shareholders that are mad at me, other ones that are really happy with me, but you get caught up in that stuff, and you lose the forest through the trees. So that's one thing I think we can do a better job at, all of us, in that regard. So it kind of brings it back to that.
Yeah,
that's the one that jumps to the forefront for me in particular.
yeah, and the thought that comes up for me, Robert, is around a culture. We talk about values, we talk about mission and vision, but what I'm getting from, as I'm listening to you, is that, especially in your space, that the culture, the bottom line of the culture, and then through everything else, has to be the impact on the patient, and what someone's real lived experience is with the disease that you're seeking to treat. That has to be at the heart. What you're inviting us to consider is all life science leaders to have the patient at the heart of everything that you do.
Yeah, yeah. And you started to touch on, I'm not sure if that's where you're going. It takes everyone within your company to be able to deliver. It's so I think of a story that we talked about, I think, in a pre-meeting, where we had, very early on at Arena, we had a custodial staff that we subcontracted out. And my CEO, we were very much in alignment, that we felt as though every position was important, and it didn't matter. And I'll tell you another story too. It was actually quite funny. So we decided to bring the custodial staff in-house. We paid them through regular payroll. They got benefits, exactly the same as me and the CEO. There was no executive benefit program or anything like that. They all got stock options. Every employee at Arena got stock options, so they were able to do quite well. It was really important to us to have the people right next to us doing the work, and we needed them as much as they needed us. So it was really important. Early on in my career at Arena, we had a secretary, and she would take lunch, and I would cover the front desk as VP Finance. And we were like 15 people, and we had chemists are a funny breed. I love them, but they're a funny breed. So each time they walked by the front desk, they would tease me. And like, oh, you're covering the front desk, this, that, and the other. And I'm like, well, it's important. And I said I was VP Finance. I said, someday I'm going to become CFO. And I'm going to remember you talked to me this way, jokingly. Sure enough, 4 years later, I was CFO, and we had a staff and someone who packed up the secretary. And so I never let them live that down. So, but it's
Mm,
we did whatever it took, and they were teasing as I
of course.
say, but we're always the senior management team in Arena in particular and Kintara always willing to pitch in and do whatever it takes, and to get things done. So there's
What do
very good camaraderie.
have you seen an impact of that? That whether it be back then when you were covering the front desk or this do whatever it takes when when your teams witness you, whether it's a CFO or a CEO, what have you seen as the impact in the culture when they witness you do those type of things?
I will say I don't know that I witnessed it necessarily, but I know it increased the level of the culture that we had that was really positive. The turnover at Arena was very small. So I will tell you that when I left Arena, this meant a ton to me. They put together a scrapbook, and it was, I don't know, 40 pages, and each department put together I'm going to get emotional actually, a page saying thank you. And that just meant the world to me. And people stopped and told me that I made a difference to them in the work environment. So I didn't necessarily see it, but I knew kind of after the fact that it existed because the way people treated me on the way out. So it was really, really special to me. And I have that scrapbook to this day. It's really, really powerful.
Mm. What what it just brings up is, and again, you said it. Well, you can't connect exactly the dots, but it had an impact,
Yeah.
and and a mission I have in this world in doing this work is to make the world at large a kinder, happier, more peaceful place, and I have a belief that when I help leaders and organizations create great places to work, it makes the world a better place. There's better moms, there's better dads, there's better patrons at restaurants, on airplanes, and thereby we have a better world. And so it just strikes me that while you couldn't see the ultimate result, I think that what I'm hearing you say, and even in the scrapbook, that it had an impact,
Yeah.
a real tangible
Absolutely.
impact.
Absolutely. And I'm so glad to hear you say what you just said because I felt a little bad actually yesterday. I was in the Uber uh, uh, car and I had just a ton of emails to catch up on. And I didn't talk to the Uber driver as much as I like to because I like to at least hear where they're from, what they're doing, this, that, and the other. So I got through them and we still had another 15 minutes to get to the airport. Come to find out, this individual was from China, but he had been in Vancouver for 11 years. And I'm flying to China next month, and so he knew quite a bit about the different city that I was going to. It's not Shanghai or whatever. It's a long story, but it's kind of off the beaten path. And so it was really, really, I liked connecting to people and hearing people's story because every single person has a story about how they got to where they are, whether it's through misfortune or fortune. Everyone has a story, so I like doing that. Maybe sometimes I talk a little too much in Uber cars, whatnot, but I would say most times I think the driver appreciates it. And I usually say that at the end. And it's very nice talking to you, or whatever. And I always think the same.
Yeah, I think we underestimate, and you're pointing to it, but I know, speaking for myself, we underestimate the impact that small things
Yeah.
like that. It reminds me of the story where the kid is walking on the beach and there's dozens or hundreds of starfish on the beach, and he's picking them up one at a time, throwing them in the ocean, and some grumpy codger says, well, that's not going to make a difference. There's thousands of starfish. And he tosses one in and he goes, well, just made a difference for that one.
That's good.
And I think we underestimate what an Uber car conversation, what the impact might have on that. Because he doesn't feel like he's he's a certain, in just the subservient type role. He's a human that
Yeah.
that the passenger connected with.
Well, I'll tell you, and again, we're getting off the path, but maybe not. What
Okay.
I like to do, and I found out that my friends love this, is we always sign our wine bottles, with a message, and the, the I got the gold marker that I write on the bottles. But more recently, I got I ordered through Amazon where you can put labels over the label,
Okay.
and so I customize the label, like whether it's happy birthday or one of my friends just joined the board of directors, and I put a message on there, and I called it the winery that with his last name and different things, and it's a small little personal touch in that regard means the world to a lot of people. So I totally agree with you. Sometimes you forget that, and you need to get back to that.
Yeah.
I'm
How
learning every day.
how are you bringing these small acts of this idea of small acts of kindness, small acts of connection? How have you brought that, whether it be here at Kintara or in past roles, how have you brought that into the culture of the companies you've led?
Well, maybe through swag. So people love swag. We got some umbrellas, and they all came to me. And so I went up to visit my CFO, and these umbrellas are enormous, and they fit diagonal in my on my carry-on. So barely though. And so when I pull my bag, it wobbles and whatever. But I brought two umbrellas up to him, and he was so happy that I was able to do that, and I made the effort to do that. It's little things like that. I got a bunch of hats too, and so I hand those out to my board of directors, to my different stakeholders. I brought a bunch to, I think it was JP Morgan, and people love that. It's a small thing, but I think just before you start in a meeting, just understanding what's up in life with people, I think is really important. So
Hmm.
just being real, I suppose.
So the values at Kintara, what do those look like in terms of how you lead and how they are more than just a page on your website or a plaque on the wall?
We have several. I think we have five of them, but the ones that stick out to me are people first. It's that's what it's really all about, whether it's patients or physicians or whatever. We're all just people in the end, and you just got to make sure you treat people with respect and dignity.
Mm.
Um, the other one that's semi-related is community. We're doing this for greater good within the community of biotech, but also the world in general is one big community. And then the other one that I think sticks out to me is excellence. We try to be excellent in everything that we do, and continue to be that way. Whether it's the small things or the big things. Thinking about things and always trying to do better and be excellent is really important.
Mm. Is are- I think often I remember an interview about the Netflix culture. Somebody was investigating Netflix, and they asked the question, well, how often do you talk about culture? And the leaders that they were asked that got asked that question kind of smirked, and they said, well, we talk about it every day.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm curious for you, with you just named two or three of the five core values at Kintara. How do you operationalize culture? How do you talk about that?
Well, and so maybe operationalize it by acting upon it. So I mentioned my EC. We're a small company, executive committee. I will bring up an issue, and it's through Zoom, but five people. I say I want to hear what everyone has to say in this regard, because you all come at it from a different approach. I have my finance guy, I have my PMC guy, I have my pharmacology guy, my operations guy, and my CSO. And oftentimes they come with an approach that I never think of, or an angle. And so to me, that's operationalizing it. one of the I have a board meeting, 4 or 5 times a year, but then I have calls with them. They tell me that they like the culture that I've created. They've said that several times now to me. And it's how I act, and not only on the call, but they hear it through the emails that I send and whatnot. So basically, walking the walk is really important, and you don't necessarily notice it, but others notice it, and so
Yeah.
I notice it in other people. So I'm always surprised that I don't necessarily think that it makes a difference when I do it, but I see it on the other side. So
Mm.
yeah,
Yeah, I love that because culture exists whether you talk about it or not. And what I hear you describing, Robert, is you walk the talk, you walk and live what's on the website and what's on the plaque, the virtual plaque on the wall, so to speak.
yeah, yeah,
That's how they become real.
agreed.
Mm.
You have to really live them every day too, because if you deviate from that, all that hard work can sometimes be really discounted pretty significantly. Yeah, or lost.
Yeah, you can lose credibility in an instant,
Agreed.
because we're always being watched.
Yeah.
Whether you're CEO, whether you're the janitor, we're always being watched.
Yes.
And you can lose credibility in fractions of the second of a minute.
I just saw a video. The cameras were off on the live feed for a newscaster that I happen to like, and he treated his staff horribly during this like 10-second period. That I was just shocked, that happens. And so I'll get strong the phrase like, what you do in the dark is important as what you do in the light. So
Mm. That's such wise words. Final question for this
where
for
do
this for this first part of our conversation, because I have a feeling we're going to be doing part two of this at some
No,
point.
I love that. Yeah.
But if you could seed in the minds of life science CEOs everywhere, one conversation that they're going to have over the next week with their teams or with their company, what would be that conversation that you would plan?
What would I plant? Um, it's interesting because we're dealing with so many different headwinds currently. Um, I maybe that this time, getting back to maybe the financial side, this time will pass. We need to, buckle down, focus on why we're all doing this, but maybe make some decisions that hurt a little bit, maybe the CEO in the pocketbook a little bit as well, but to get through the chasm and understand that we're doing good work, that we're out for the patients, but these times are difficult, and we need to see our way through it, and we will. Ultimately, we will.
Mm.
I think, sadly, what fed into this was a lot of companies going public that maybe didn't have the right clinical development, and now we're all feeling that pain. It's starting to weed out, and ultimately, the companies that have good science will win the day again.
Mm. I remember I was listening to an interview and the guest said, it'll all be okay in the end. And if it's not okay, that just means it's not the end yet.
I like that. That's good.
Robert, this has been such a joy. I love I love our ability to connect here, and for those that are listening to appreciate you and your journey. If folks want to know more about you or about Kintara, where can we send them?
Certainly the website has lots of information, www.kintara.com. My email address is rhoffman, Hoffman, @kintara.com. I try to reply to those as quick as possible, and I'm happy to do so.
Awesome. Well, we'll put all that in the show notes. And again, thanks so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Appreciate you. Good seeing you.